going to have joining us by phone now the former Speaker of the Republican House of Representatives at that time, Kevin McCarthy, who joins us by phone. Congressman, this is such a troubling moment for our country to see an attempted assassination like this in the heat of a political campaign 4 months out from the election. I wonder what your message is to your Republican colleagues and to the country at this hour.
Well, my first are to the prayers to the family that have lost lives and to the president. The challenge that we have is the rhetoric that has continued to rise in this country. We all I think, need to take a very deep breath to be able to work forward here. I've been able to speak to the president's son and to the staff who was with the president going back to the plane. I know the fear that they had looking through that and watching the President Trump himself get shot, but how strong he was going through what he's going through today.
What have you learned, former Speaker McCarthy, about what's happening in former President Trump's inner circle tonight? We've heard from Donald Trump Jr. What did he tell you? What are you hearing from his top campaign advisors? You are as plugged in as any Republican I know. Please help us understand what is going on within the inner circle of the presumptive nominee at this exact time tonight.
Well, with his son was back in Florida, is actually on a boat when he was told, but he was able to talk to his father very quickly. I've talked to some staff that were right next to the president, was with him in the hospital, in the car driving back. The president is, if you can only imagine going through this, but the strength that this man has gone through his entire life, and to be sitting on stage and watch that, a lot of their thoughts and prayers are with the family of who came to the rally, lost their lives, and was injured. We're now hearing a colleague, Congressman Ronnie Jackson's nephew, is one individual who was wounded and shot in the neck, scraped him, was at the rally as well.
That is the congressman and former White House physician, Ronnie Jackson. You were saying his nephew. You know this is true? You know this?
Yes. Ronnie has put this out forward that his nephew was there at the rally, back behind the tent, and was wounded in the incident. I spoke to a couple congressmen who were there, who just maybe 30 feet back, and one of the incidents of a lady being wounded was just right behind them, was shot. The number of bullets they heard going through, you could hear from their voices the concern. But, here's the President Trump who's been shot, and his concern has really been with those at the rally who were injured. And his thanks was to the Secret Service, to the work that they have done, the protection that they have provided. He is actually dealing with this much calmer than I imagine others that can go through it. But his real concern is with those who were injured at the rally itself.
Do you believe, former Speaker McCarthy, there will still be outdoor rallies in this campaign for the rest of 2024?
The Secret Service probably will have a big say in that. But it's the one thing, knowing President Trump, he loves to be with the people. And anything the president does, there's such large crowds. I don't know how you go about doing it without having it, but maybe I know there'll be heightened security going forward. There just has to be.
Do you think this delays the vice presidential selection or the convention in any way?
Knowing President Trump, no, not at all. I mean, I know that just talking to him the other day, he's going down to the very final portion here of making that decision. But knowing the president, this will only be more invigorated to make sure to not let a sick person like this win in any shape or form, and to show the country that we can come together. We've got to, in this nation, to respect one another's opinion. If somebody has a different opinion of yours, does not mean they're less American. We need to respect different opinion. That's what democracy is about. And to see a tragic situation like this, you look back at American history in the 60s and others, we do not want to repeat from that. We're supposed to be a more perfect union, to strive to be better. And I hope people take this moment in time of the attack on President Trump's life to actually dial down the rhetoric and really start respecting one another's differences of opinion.
Former Speaker Kevin McCarthy, we couldn't agree with that sentiment more. We need to show more respect and be able to have civil conversations. There is no place for political violence, period. I do want to note at this hour that the FBI has issued a formal statement now saying that they have taken over from the Secret Service and are now the lead federal law enforcement agency investigating this incident involving former President Donald Trump earlier today in Butler, Pennsylvania. Special agents of the FBI Pittsburgh field office were the first immediate responders here, including crisis response team members, evidence response technicians, and they are going to continue to support the investigation with the full resources of the FBI, along with the Secret Service and local law enforcement. And they have actually published a tip line for anyone who has information to share who might have been there, an eyewitness. That tip line, 1-800-CALL-FBI, asking for any information that could assist with the investigation. I also just want to quickly update on those two individuals that the Secret Service said were injured at the rally. We know that those two patients are at Allegheny General Hospital. They were indeed injured. The hospital confirms both patients are in critical condition. So Donald Trump is recovering from his injuries at this hour. There was one death and two people in critical condition at this hour. Let's bring back into the conversation Chief Washington Correspondent Major Garrett. He is on the phone. Major?
Hi, Margaret. Hello, everyone. We've had to break down our live shot position because there's lightning and thunder in the region, and we didn't want to be out in the middle of that and struck by lightning. You can understand that. I've just been on the phone with Reince Priebus, who's chairman of the host committee of the convention here in Milwaukee. It has not been relayed to him formally by the U.S. Secret Service that they are going to enlarge the security perimeter here. He does not doubt that that's what's going to happen. That has not been officially conveyed to him yet, but he expects that to happen. We certainly have reporting from our own Nicole Skanga that tells us that's going to occur. Reince Priebus, the chairman of the host committee here, believes that, in fact, will occur. What I can tell you right now, at this hour in downtown Milwaukee, just 2 blocks from the arena, the Fiserv Arena, where the convention will be conducted, things are, for the moment, as normal. The apparatus to build a security perimeter is certainly visible, but nothing is being extended at the present hour. There's certainly more police visible, a couple of helicopters that I didn't see an hour or two ago, but everything else, for the moment, is as it was. And I would say as normal as something could be in preparation for a security event of this magnitude starting on Monday here in Milwaukee. One other thing to note, and this has been a part of our conversation for the last hour or so, as Robert Costa pointed out, as Olivia Rinaldi pointed out, we are still awaiting former President Trump's announcement of a running mate. Talking to those within the Trump inner circle, this assassination attempt in Butler, Pennsylvania, has created many repercussions, obviously. One of the repercussions is, has this brought into somewhat sharper relief something that former President Trump has routinely said, that the pick he wants to have as a running mate, the political impact is maybe not as important to him as the ability to carry out the job should something terrible happen. Those are the former president's words. He said that many times. The former president has said privately to his advisors, not tonight, but in the past, North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum, as a 2-term sitting governor, fits that idea that he has as someone who could instantly step into the job. Does this event in Butler, Pennsylvania, raise questions about J.D. Vance, 39 years old, 1.5 years in the United States Senate? Would that be sufficiently experienced in light of this assassination attempt? We don't know, but those in the Trump inner circle who have talked about the way this is now being thought about in those circles are coming to the conclusion that it's going to get a very serious relook in light of events this afternoon in Butler, Pennsylvania.
Major Garrett, this just changes so much for the political moment we are in, for the campaign we are all covering as part of the exercise in democracy, which is in this country to go and express yourself and try to force change through the ballot box, not through violence. And violence we saw today, we are describing it in this context because it was at a political event. It was at a political rally. We have gun violence in this country. We have shooting events and all the time, frankly. But we are in a high-threat environment. We are in a politically charged environment. And the assumption here is that the shooter was attempting to assassinate the Republican candidate for a political outcome. And we need to find out more about any kind of identifiers on the shooter, who he was, what his motivations were.